Hello and welcome to episode 49 of Movies You Miss podcast. I'm Vee.
I'm John.
How you doing today, John?
Doing well, Vee. Very excited about today's episode. Looking forward to discussing these fantastic directors, writers, producers. Very excited for this episode brought to us by the Coen Brothers.
They are a pretty amazing movie-making duo, that's for sure.
Most definitely. There's a few of their films that I don't love as much as the other, which always tends to happen. I think out of their entire catalog, there might be two or three that I'm like, yeah, I don't ever have to watch that one again. But majority of their films, I love watching over and over.
That's great. I've actually only seen about half of their movies, but of those, I've enjoyed just about every one as well, yes.
Oh, awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to getting into both of these then.
Especially because I think they're two of their more underrated movies that they've made.
Most underrated movies, I would have to agree with you. I actually have only seen your movie one other time before. I had been meaning to rewatch your film for a long time, and we'll get into that in a minute. My film I saw in theaters. Even now on video and streaming, I've still throughout my last few years been like, have you seen such and such a movie? And many people have never even heard of my pick. So I think it's going to be fun discussing both of these.
Yeah, I agree. But before we get into that, we have a couple pieces of business to get into, including our contest that we've been talking about. We ran a contest for the first 20 reviews on Apple Podcasts and a raffle for those first 20 people who are early listeners to our podcast, early reviewers who we appreciate so much. For this raffle, the winners will get to pick a movie for John and I to discuss on the podcast. So thank you so much, everyone who has reviewed so far. The winners that we picked, drumroll please,
Drum roll,
were Geek Creek and Geology Guy. Thank you both so much. Geek Creek actually is one of our earliest listeners. That is Monty, a good friend of mine.
Oh, sweet.
I was excited for his name to be pulled. And funny enough, Geology Guy is our most recent reviewer.
Yes, who I don't have any idea who they are.
Me either, so please reach out to
wonderful.
us. Yeah, please reach out to us on any form of social media, or you can send an email to moviesyoumissedpod@gmail.com. Please let us know what movie you would like us to cover in an episode that's coming up, and Monty, please do the same.
Yes, indeed. So based off of these two winners, Monty and Geology Guy, since we don't know who Geology Guy is, send us an email, get at us on social media, give us a movie that you would like us to discuss. So I'm excited to see what is going to come about.
Me too, and I've actually known Monty since I was 14 years old, and
oh wow,
he's got a wicked sense of humor. I could totally see him giving us just some random, really twisted movie that we need to talk about on this show.
Well, I do hope that is the case.
He's got a wicked sense of humor.
Awesome. Well, I am always down to watch something I've never seen or something twisted or something dark, so definitely get at us with these suggestions.
Yeah, I mean, to give you an example, he's the one who introduced me to The Cell.
Oh, all right, sweet.
Yeah.
Great movie. Great introduction, I imagine. Obviously, it was a great enough movie for V to choose early on in this podcast, and I'm glad that that was chosen, because that movie is Wild Times.
Yeah, he'll either do that or something like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh, all right. Nothing wrong with that either.
He has a great, wide taste in movies. He has a very eclectic taste in movies that I respect. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so thank you both Monty and Geology Guy, and also everyone else who's supported us and given us those first 20 reviews on the Apple Podcast app. We deeply appreciate it, and, you know, if this goes well, I think would be really excited to do it again for the next 20 reviews.
Oh, definitely. I think this will be something that we carry on.
Fabulous.
With.
All
yes,
right.
in the future of our podcast here at Movies You Miss Podcast.
So that's the first piece of business, and the second piece is our normal question to the both of us. John, have you seen any new movies this week?
Yes, I most certainly did. First one, although, is not a new movie. It is a movie that I've never seen before. I have been wanting to see it. I have a VHS copy of it, just never watched it. And I was glad to finally see this movie. I got to experience it in theaters at a Fathom event. V and I have been talking about Fathom events since the Movies You Miss podcast launched, and we have both been enjoying a lot of these events, and I'm speaking most recently of having seen Casablanca for the very first time, starring Humphrey Bogart and Ingmar Bergman and many other people that are definitely recognizable from the golden age of Hollywood.
Yes, definitely. And in fact, John and I both partook in this Fathom event, and it was a first-time viewing for both of us.
I know, that was so awesome.
And so it's a little bit confession time. We do like to say that we are passionate about movies and movie lovers, but neither of us had actually seen Casablanca before.
I know, right?
Cue
it
the
happens,
judgment.
You know? Yeah, I know. I can only imagine how many people are likely going to be like, oh my God, and they call themselves film people? Because You've thrown that at me in the past. And you're like, you haven't seen that movie and you call yourself a film guy? I'm like, yeah, I do. I'm allowed to have not seen certain movies. It just doesn't, it hasn't happened yet. And I got to say, Casablanca is the definition of Hollywood classic. I mean, my gosh, it's funny, it's a bit heartbreaking, the music is great, cinematography is amazing, the story is great. I immediately went to Best Buy and bought the 4K transfer of Casablanca after having seen this movie at Fathom events. So definitely very thankful that I actually got to see it with my father. He was a fan of the movie growing up, and he hadn't seen it in I don't know how long, and he suggested we go see it, and I was very glad that he did, because it, again, absolute fantastic film.
With a lot of wonderful classic movie quotes as well.
Oh, yes. Very quotable movie, lines that people have been saying for decades, and going back to our holiday episodes, when I chose The Holiday, there is a moment in The Holiday where Jack Black and Kate Winslet's character both watch Casablanca and talk about how a certain line would not have had the certain pizzazz that it had, the way that Humphrey Bogart had said. He's like, here's looking at you, Elsa. It doesn't have that same ring. Instead of, here's looking at you, kid. And again, I'd seen The Holiday so many times, I'm like, God, Casablanca, I gotta watch it. Never did, and finally did. So very glad that I did that, and I'm glad that V, you also did it the same week. So great times for both of us at the cinema.
That's right. And what was your second movie?
My second movie. So my second film was a movie that I had very little interest in. I really figured I would just wait until it came out on streaming. But there were factors that made me go to the theater. One being that this was directed by Elizabeth Banks. Those that know Elizabeth Banks know that she directs films as well as stars in them and is really fantastic on screen. And this movie is titled Cocaine Bear, and it is being marketed all over the place like crazy. I went on a Tuesday night to see it at the Regal Cinema. It's Ray Liotta's last full feature film. Beyond Ray Liotta and Elizabeth Banks has Kerry Russell, Jesse Tyler Ferguson, Margot Martindale, O'Shea Jackson, Isaiah Whitlock Jr. I mean, this movie is, as we've said many times in this podcast, stacked with people that are recognizable. And if you don't know anything about this movie, this is about a wild bear that gets into a vat of cocaine. And this movie is based on a true story. And the only true story part of it is that a bear gets into a vat of cocaine. So the rest of this movie is an absolute bloody, fantastic fucking farce. I laughed my entire ass off, and I will definitely see this movie. I will very likely own this movie. As we said, rest in peace, Ray Liotta. It's bloody. It's got some scary moments. The bear is all CGI, but pretty convincing. And I loved every single minute of it, and I'm so glad that I saw it in theaters, and I highly recommend everybody give this movie a shot, because Elizabeth Banks did a great fucking job with it.
That's awesome. And funny enough, in my favorite podcast that isn't ours, it's my favorite murder podcast, they actually told the story of the drug dealer who was flying a plane and dropped his cocaine, and a bear found it. And I actually knew of the story from this podcast. And very cool. And so I knew where this film was based off of. And then, of course, they took glorious bloody liberties. Oh,
absolutely. Yeah. Yes. Apparently the bear did actually overdose, but there's a line that I read. Something about for at least 5 minutes, the bear was the apex predator on the entire planet. And This bear, like literally, there's no holds barred. Oh, there's a moment where the bear does a line of cocaine off a tree trunk that it's just one of those moments where the bear sees the coke on the tree, goes up and goes, and just does the full line of coke and then goes and rips some fucking legs off. It's just so much bloody fun. I loved every minute of it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, definitely check it out if you can in theaters. It is worth every bit of your hour and 25 minutes. It's so awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, so V, beyond Casablanca, did you see anything else this week in the theater?
I did. I was very excited for this movie.
Oh.
And Michael B. Jordan both stars and directs this movie.
Ah, yes.
This is Creed 3.
Uh-huh.
And it also stars Jonathan Majors. Now, this movie, I've mentioned the series a couple times. The Creed series is pretty good. Creed 2 especially I thought was fantastic. So I was so I was really excited for this third installment of this series and continuation of the Rocky universe. Unfortunately, I was deeply disappointed. I really didn't enjoy this movie. I didn't like the pacing. It felt very, for lack of a better term, amateurish, though I'm not trying to be as harsh as that towards Michael B. Jordan, but the editing and the pacing and how the last act was built and the crescendo and how the climax of the movie fell very flat. It just felt like someone who made a movie who wasn't used to making movies and didn't have the polish to do so.
Interesting.
And so, yeah, I think that it maybe would have been better in another director's hands who was more seasoned, who'd done, fully feature-length, big budget movies before. I read that was the reason why Sylvester Stallone didn't join this installment either.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there were some creative differences, and one of the big ones was just how the story was being told and reading between the lines, how Michael B. Jordan was kind of setting up the film and directing it. So that's unfortunate, and I really think Jonathan Majors was a bit wasted. He's a very, very good antagonist. I really liked him as in this kind of bad guy role, and I think he could have been utilized a bit better. His story could have been told a bit better. So yeah, I think overall there are some pretty weak points to this movie, and it really has to do with the structure more than the acting or the score or any of those big pieces. It was more behind the scenes that I think what led it to falling flat.
Interesting. I really like Michael B. Jordan as an actor. I loved him in the first Black Panther. I thought he was fantastic. Mm-hmm. That is unfortunate to hear. I haven't heard too many wonderful things about Creed 3, and that always does kind of suck to hear, especially because I know Michael B. Jordan definitely was putting his whole heart into it.
Yeah. All right, and so now I think it's time to get into our movies of the week.
Yes, let's jump right in. I am so excited to get into my movie, but first I just want to reiterate a little bit about what we are here at Movies You Miss Podcast. If you are a first-time listener, where you been? This is episode 49 for crying out loud.
No,
welcome,
he means
if you
welcome.
are new. Yes, welcome to Movies You Miss Podcast. We are two veterans from the entertainment industry with a collective 25 years in that entertainment industry. We are here to discuss movies that we feel have fallen under the radar, films that need to be revisited, films that we love. We don't do spoilers here, so when we do discuss our films, we don't give you the ending, we don't give you the twists, we don't give you the turns. Anyway, moving on to my pick of the week, we are going a little bit crazy and excitingly so. This is our Coen Brothers episode. I am a big fan of the Coen Brothers. Those of you that may recognize the name would very likely know them from such fantastic films as Fargo, The Big Lebowski, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?, Blood Simple, Miller's Crossing, Barton Fink, No Country for Old Men Best Picture winner, etc., etc. I did not choose any of those movies. My pick for this week is 2008's Burn After Reading. This film stars Frances McDormand, Brad Pitt, John Malkovich, Tilda Swinton, George Clooney, J.K. Simmons, and Richard Jenkins, and just a slew of character actors that you have seen throughout your entire life. I think this might be one of the few Coen Brothers movies that does not have Stephen Root in it, which kind of blew me away because Stephen Root is in just about every Coen Brothers movie from the get-go. A little bit about Burn After Reading. Written and directed by Joel and Ethan Coen. For those that may not know who those gentlemen are, I just listed a catalog of films. Another one that I should have dropped was A Serious Man, which is also a great film. These guys, they love stupid people, and I also love watching how they write stupid people. John Malkovich plays a government agent named Osborne Cox. In the beginning, we find out is being reassigned. He's not okay with this reassignment and decides that he's going to up and leave. In the midst of all of this, we meet his wife, who is played by Tilda Swinton. She doesn't really seem to be all that invested in her husband's life or her husband's extracurriculars or anything like that. We have George Clooney. He plays a character named Harry. We have Frances McDormand. She plays Linda. Brad Pitt plays Chad. And again, like I said, a slew of other character actors. Osborne Cox leaves his government job, starts to tell his wife that he is thinking about writing a memoir about what he's been doing in the government. She thinks that that is a completely ridiculous idea. She doesn't think anybody's going to give a flying fuck about what Osborne Cox has to say.
She is such a just cold-hearted bitch in this movie.
Oh, she is so awful in this movie, but she's so great.
Oh, she's so great at being cold-hearted.
How can you not?
Love her. Oh my gosh,
so
she's
good.
so good in this type of role, but damn, do you hate her character in this movie?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Because, at the same time, like, we are introduced to Osborne Cox. The way we are introduced to him is again, the dialogue that the Coen Brothers write is always so sharp and so fantastically witty and maybe not all the time hilarious, but I think the opening of this movie is great. One of my favorite lines in the first 5 minutes of the movie is Osborne Cox is sitting next to this guy and he goes, "You have a drinking problem." Osborne looks at him and says, "A drinking problem? You're Mormon. Next to you, everybody has a drinking problem."
Ozzy, look.
What the fuck is this? I know it's not my word.
Ozzy.
I'm a great fucking analyst.
Ozzy.
Is
Ozzy,
it
things have not been going well, as you know.
You have a drinking problem.
I have a drinking problem?
This doesn't have to be unpleasant. We found something for you in state. It's a, well, it is a lower clearance level, yes, but it's not. Look, we're not terminating you.
This is an assault. I have a drinking problem? Fuck you, Peck. You're a Mormon.
Ozzy.
Next to you, we all have a drinking problem.
I love that line. I have uttered that line to so many people in my day, and not that anybody I really hang out with is Mormon. I just think that the line is fucking hilarious.
Yes, that was actually one of my favorite lines of this whole movie, too. I thought it was hilarious.
So funny. We then meet George Clooney's character, Harry, and he is kind of coming off as like he doesn't really like Osborne, but he's there anyway. He's worried about the goat cheese because he might go into anaphylactic shock. He's got an allergy to some cheeses and whatnot. Harry's there with his wife, who is a children's book author. Then we find out that Katie and Harry, Katie played by Tilda Swinton, Harry played by George Clooney, they are having an affair. Yeah. So there's a little bit of that intertwining of the introduction of George Clooney's character. Then later on, we are introduced to Frances McDormand's character, Linda. Linda, we meet in a consultation for plastic surgery, which I think is a very interesting sequence. When I first saw this movie, I was like, there's nothing wrong with Frances McDormand. She doesn't need any of this. Of course, this is a character, and this is what's going on in the movie. She works at a gym along with Brad Pitt's character, Chad. She wants to do this plastic surgery so that she can get out there and start dating again, which she is on several different dating websites. So Linda goes on a couple of dates that aren't going so well for her. She finds the guys to be a little bit boring. Later on, she ends up going out with Harry. So we're kind of finding out that he's this bit of philanderer. You can tell that there's absolutely no remorse or him even thinking about the potential consequences of what he's doing, trying to date women online. So I always thought that was kind of funny, like especially when they first go out to lunch and they're eating at the sushi restaurant. And he's all outgoing and he's just like super funny and she's just having a great time. I mean, it's George Clooney. He's a handsome fuck. So of course, any woman would be very happy to be sitting at a table with George Clooney, myself included. I always really liked their first date. And the rest of the film kind of takes a turn because Chad is brought a disc while at the gym where he works. And he's going through this disc, and it just happens to be a bunch of files that Osborne Cox has unfortunately lost while at that gym. In these files is a whole bunch of government information, top secret information. And Chad is like, ooh, maybe I can blackmail this guy and get a whole shit ton of money. So Chad tells Linda about this and is immediately on the train of, Linda, let's get this guy on the phone, blackmail him into giving us hundreds of thousands of dollars to keep his secrets quiet so you can get your elective surgery and maybe we can leave working at the gym and live a lavish life. Not together, just off, on their own. So the rest of the movie is Osborne Cox trying to track down his missing disc with all of this information. He then tells his wife that he just got off the phone with somebody trying to blackmail him because they found this disc. She says to him, who the hell thinks that would be worth anything? And that's another one of my favorite lines because you literally can see just how much she just doesn't give a shit about her husband. It's insane.
Oh, she's so mean and has so much disdain for him.
So mean. I know, it's crazy.
And I love George Clooney's character in this movie because Harry, even though he's a philanderer, is such a weenie. He's such a weak man in this movie.
Definitely. Yeah, his ego is very greatly bruised, and we're not entirely sure why. His wife is beautiful. He's got a great job. He's...
Yeah.
Who the hell knows?
He's super
that's just
insecure.
The character.
Yeah.
It's there it is. Yeah, he's a very insecure man, and it's hilarious because it's George Clooney playing this character, and we all know George Clooney is very far from being insecure. From then on, it's just stupid moment after stupid moment after stupid moment. And like I said earlier, they write stupid people so well. And the one phone call between Chad, Linda, and Osborne Cox is another one of my most favorite parts of this movie because Chad gets him on the phone in the middle of the night, and Osborne Cox answers the phone. He's like, hello, what's going on? And Chad's like, is this Osborne Cox? He asks him if this is Osborne Cox like 4 different times. And finally, John Malkovich starts going off. And I love Malkovich in this movie. I've always liked Malkovich as an actor, but, Osborne thinks like, this memoir is going to unveil a whole bunch of different secrets. We can't let I just don't want the Russians to get involved. Of course, later on, Chad and Linda go to the Russian embassy, and they bring this disc to one of the Russian guys. And another great line is this a PC or a Mac disc? And, it's just like there's moments in this movie that are so human. And then it goes off the rails. It really kind of does. And burn after reading, we've all heard that term before. It's like, it's kind of like the self-destruct message at the end, in the beginning of Mission Impossible. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds, and then, of course, the little flash and the smoke comes out of the laptop. I'm a big fan of this movie. I saw this movie in theaters when it came out. My family and I went and saw it. My parents are major fans of the Coen Brothers. They're big Fargo fans, which is hilarious because that movie is a twisted true story. This movie is definitely a farce.
It's really just an exercise in stupidity.
And that's exactly right as well, because it literally doesn't let up with the stupidity. And you'd think that, okay, well, maybe they'll do something smart. And I'm not just talking about Linda and Chad. I'm talking about Harry. I'm talking about Katie. I'm talking about Osborne Cox. I'm watching this movie again. I haven't watched it in a number of years. And every time Osborne introduces himself, especially when Chad gets him on the phone, it's like, dude, you're literally... Just stop. You're not... Maybe you are an important figure, but you gotta stop just throwing out who you are.
I feel like this could be a movie that gets funnier every time you watch it.
I think I agree with you on that, because I think I laughed more this time around watching it than I have the first few times. I've seen this movie maybe 6 different times.
Okay.
Like I said, in theaters, I loved it. I definitely laughed. But the more I watch it and the more I'm digesting the movie, I'm realizing literally that it's one of the funniest fucking movies that I've seen in a long time. And again, it's already over 10 years old. This movie came out in 2008.
Yeah, I watched it last night and laughed a couple times and just thought that there weren't any sympathetic characters. There was nobody who you'd really root for in this movie. They're all a bunch of just moronic assholes in this movie.
Yeah,
leading
definitely
very bland lives. And after I finished the movie, I was like, I mean, I didn't hate it, but now that we're talking about it, and now that you're reminding me of certain scenes or certain lines, I feel like I'm laughing more and like, oh yeah, that was really funny, actually. I think it's one of those movies that takes a couple times to get funny.
Sure, I completely understand that, and I get that, because it does happen very fast. This is not a movie like other Coen Brothers movies where there's 25, 30 minutes of exposition dialogue. It literally starts right off, and it does not let up. And I think that is another reason why the Coen Brothers do what they do so well, because just like Big Lebowski, starts off right away hilarious, you know, and at the same time, you're kind of like, who is this guy, the dude? So this movie reunites George Clooney and Brad Pitt. We all know that George Clooney and Brad Pitt were in the trilogy of the Ocean's films. I love Ocean's 11, did not like Ocean's 12.
Oh, it's terrible.
I thought Ocean's 13 was all right. I didn't hate Ocean's 13.
Agreed.
But I have not watched either Ocean's 12 or 13 as often as I've watched Ocean's 11, and I definitely think that it was awesome to see them together in a movie, even though they don't have a whole lot of screen time together, but the screen time they do have together is pretty fucking funny.
Pretty
if you ask me.
fantastic, yes.
So this movie not only reunites George Clooney with Brad Pitt, this reunites George Clooney for the third time with the Coen Brothers. For those of you that I'm sure are aware of, the first time George Clooney was ever in a Coen Brothers movie was the phenomenal Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, which is still one of the greatest movies I've ever seen. And I remember wanting to see Oh Brother, Where Art Thou because the commercial that I saw on TV had George Clooney singing No Man of Constant Sorrow. And I said to my dad, George Clooney's singing in a movie. We got to see that. And next weekend, we were out and seeing Oh Brother, Where Art Thou in the theaters. And I cannot tell you how many times I've watched Oh Brother, Where Art Thou. I think I've watched it at least 100 times in the last 20 years. It's such a phenomenal take on Ulysses, the Odyssey. Just an amazing cast of characters. Beyond that one, George Clooney and the Coen Brothers did a movie with Catherine Zeta-Jones and Billy Bob Thornton called Intolerable Cruelty, which is a very interesting movie. I own that one also. I don't watch it as often as I think I should, but it's still one of those movies that every time I watch, I'm like, do I like that movie or don't I like that movie? It's a tough one.
Yeah, it's very quirky.
Yeah, very, very
even
quirky,
for the
but it's
Coen Brothers.
like, right. I know, isn't that strange?
Yeah, it's
all
a
their
scale.
shit is on the verge of there should be the quirky scale when thinking about watching a Coen Brothers movie. And this would be again the third one that George Clooney and the Coen Brothers did. The three of them have dubbed all three of those movies the trilogy of idiots, and I love that because definitely Oh Brother, Where Art Thou is definitely full of idiocy, as is Intolerable Cruelty, as is Burn After Reading. George Clooney is a huge supporter of the Coen Brothers. He has claimed that he's done nothing but watch the Coen Brothers work. He tries to bring their style and their set etiquette to films that he directs also. For those that may not know, George Clooney is also a director. So the Coen Brothers are actually notorious for having 10-hour shoot days. That includes hair, makeup, wardrobe, and everything.
Whoa.
So they do not shoot past 10 hours, almost like Clint Eastwood. They do 10-hour days all the time, which is fantastic. I think that is one of my favorite parts about the Coen Brothers. It is definitely a dream for anybody in the entertainment industry. There's a couple of Easter eggs in this movie. At one point, Linda takes Harry to the movies, and there's a poster for the movie that they're going to go see, starring Claire Danes and Dermot Mulroney. And in that sequence of the movie theater, there's a poster for another Coen Brothers movie called Hail Caesar. And I know I've mentioned Hail Caesar, I think, once before on this podcast. That movie is another underrated gem, and it was between this or Hail Caesar for me. And I think this one won because I laughed more during this one. But I've only seen Hail Caesar once, and I got to watch it again. And Hail Caesar, real quickly, is about background actors in Hollywood. And if you, V, have not seen Hail Caesar, it's definitely worth a watch.
And that also stars George Clooney.
Yes, Clooney is also in that one, as is Wayne Knight, who is Dennis Nedry in Jurassic Park. And several other actors the young guy that plays Han Solo in the Solo film, he's also in Hail Caesar. He plays an actor, and Ray Fiennes is also in it. Definitely check out Hail Caesar. It's great. This movie also reunites Frances McDormand with the Coen Brothers for the 7th time. She's also married to Joel Coen, so there's that. She was in Fargo, which we all know. If you don't know Fargo by now, get to it. It's fantastic. Frances McDormand's in Blood Simple, Raising Arizona, Miller's Crossing, Barton Fink, Fargo, and The Man Who Wasn't There. Burn After Reading was on the 2007 Blacklist, which is fascinating because this is the Coen Brothers, and I never would have thought that the Coen Brothers would ever be on a blacklist list. And for those that may not recall what the blacklist is in Hollywood, there's several blacklists. There's the bad blacklist, and there's the good blacklist. This is the good blacklist. Scripts that are fantastic yet had not yet been produced, and that's where this film fell, which was strange. And also, interestingly enough, this film was written every other day that the Coen brothers took a day off from writing No Country for Old Men. So I thought that was very interesting because, of course, these guys are pumping out scripts all the time because they're constantly working. And No Country for Old Men and Burn After Reading, they were writing back to back. Now, No Country for Old Men is based off of the Cormac McCarthy novel, which we all know. I love No Country for Old Men. That is definitely one of the more modern Westerns that I would say that I enjoy. I don't know if I would necessarily put it in the Western category, but it kind of is.
Yeah, it's
if you've seen it, there's definitely
that's the genre for sure.
Kind of
modern
feel
Western,
going for it, yeah.
similar to Hell or High Water. That's another example of a modern Western. Yeah.
Right. Yes.
And that makes sense because No Country for Old Men is such a heavy, tense thriller of a movie.
Oh, yeah.
You'd need some lightheartedness to do on the side in order to just balance your mind out. So it makes sense they were writing it at the same time.
Yeah, no, I think it's so awesome. Because, again, I love both of those movies. And I remember when No Country for Old Men came out, I was working at the CW, and I hit up my buddy. I was like, dude, let's go see No Country for Old Men tonight. And then we both walked out like, that was a masterpiece. Like, just an absolutely fantastic film. This film actually was supposed to be DP'd by Roger Deakins. However, he was unavailable because he was doing the Sam Mendes film Revolutionary Road with Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet. I never saw Revolutionary Road. I worked on the trailers for it. And oddly enough, it wasn't a movie that I felt I needed to see. I don't know if anybody's seen it, but it's about a couple going through a bunch of turmoil. It's supposed to be a very heavy drama.
It's brutal. I will never see it again.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah, it's one of those movies. It's just the story is so painful to watch, and the characters, the amount of turmoil they're going through. You're so uncomfortable that you leave and you're like, wow, that was a really good movie. I'm never watching it again.
Gotcha. Yeah. That's all I've heard from it. But the cool thing about the DP of this movie, and he's one of my favorite DPs, Emanuel Lubezki was the DP on Burn After Reading. For those that may not know who he is the phenomenal Oscar-winning cinematographer for the film Gravity, for the film Birdman. He also did Children of Men, which of course we both love on this podcast. Major masterpiece of a film. He DP'd Sleepy Hollow, the Tim Burton take on Sleepy Hollow. He even DP'd The Birdcage with Nathan Lane and Robin Williams. Yeah. So he's definitely had quite the career, and he is one hell of a cinematographer. Another actor that I mentioned earlier, J.K. Simmons, he is in this movie maybe a grand total of about 4 minutes.
It doesn't matter.
He sits the entire time.
I love him
it
so
doesn't
much
matter.
in
No.
this movie. He's my favorite
so
part
good
of this whole movie.
Oh, was he really?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Oh, that's awesome. He really is great. Majority of the time, J.K. Simmons is great. I don't think I've ever watched a movie and been like, no, I don't know.
No,
well,
I
maybe
love
Juno.
J.K.
I'm going to say Juno. Juno.
But
the
he
movie
was great.
As a whole.
He was
great as her father. Definitely. Yeah. Again, great actor. This film was the opening film of the 2008 Venice Film Festival, which is awesome. And the word fuck is used 67 times throughout the entirety of Burn After Reading in the hour and a half that we have to enjoy of this movie. The film was released on September 12th of 2008. The budget was $37 million. Opening weekend came in at $17.1 million. U.S. gross was $60.3 million. The worldwide gross for Burn After Reading, V, what do you think? Give me a number. What do you think?
$87 million.
$163.7 million worldwide for Burn After Reading. Yeah, it killed it. Killed it.
Didn't know.
No pun intended.
I didn't know that the Coen Brothers were that popular overseas.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the cool thing about cinema. It gets around.
Do you know what's crazy is that it has double the amount of fucks in it than Aliens did.
Oh, wow. That's cool. That's right. Yeah, Aliens had fuck used quite a bit, didn't it?
Not as much as Burn After Reading, apparently.
Not as much as Burn After Reading. Every character in this film was written with every one of these actors in mind. Not anybody else was ever considered for Osborne Cox, for Harry, for Chad, for Linda. Nothing. Now, of course, Frances McDormand is married to Joel Coen, so There's a little bit of bias there. And I do love Frances McDormand as an actor. I just hated Nomadland. However, I still respect Frances McDormand as an actress. I think she's still good. And I've talked to many people that have been on several Coen Brothers sets, and all they have ever said was that they saw their families at the end of every day. They saw their kids. They were able to put them to bed. They were able to have dinner at home. And what more could you want in making a movie with the masters that are the Coen Brothers?
Yes, it's almost like having a normal job.
Yeah, kind of. Exactly. That's Burn After Reading. For those that haven't seen it, give it a shot. It's streaming on HBO Max now. And one of our favorite games here at Movies You Missed Pod is having V guess the highest grossing film of the year my pick came out. So V, I'm curious if you might be able to tell me what the highest grossing film of 2008 was. It is a comic book movie.
Is it Iron Man?
It is not Iron Man.
Okay.
It is not a Marvel.
I was just going to ask, is it
Comic book
DC or
movie.
Marvel?
It is a DC comic book movie.
Oh, that would be The Dark Knight.
That is correct. The
Yes.
Dark Knight, written and directed by Christopher Nolan, starring Christian Bale and Heath Ledger. The number 2 highest grossing film was your original guess of Iron Man with Robert Downey Jr.
So I was right on the year, at least.
You were right on the year, and that, in my opinion, is the only good Iron Man, but I haven't seen 2 or 3 in a number of years, so I'm not entirely sure if 2 or 3 would get any better with age. I have no idea.
No, I think you're right.
Oh, all right. Fantastic. Number 3 is a movie that the world over completely despises, and oddly enough, we're getting a 5th installment coming up soon. V, could you tell me what that one might be? Your hint is... Oh, God, what do I hint you here? Your hint is Whip Crack.
Oh, my
I
God.
should give it away.
Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull. Yes, everyone
Indiana Jones and the
agrees.
Crystal
It's
Skull.
everyone agrees. That you know what? That movie unites the world in mutual
It does.
hatred.
Hatred, indeed it does. I feel like that was literally like Shia LaBeouf's end right there.
It was certainly the beginning of the end.
Beginning of the end. There you go. Yeah. Number 4 highest grossing, Hancock with Will Smith. I enjoyed that movie. Charlize Theron's also in it. I think it's kind of fun. I don't think it's great. Oh, not a fan, huh?
The first half of that movie is original, fun, really interesting, and then the second half of that movie just devolves into Hollywood cliche drivel. It is like
Definitely.
2 different movies, and it just pisses me off because they had it in the first half.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. Definitely. I will completely agree with you on that. Number 5 was WALL-E from Pixar, which I absolutely love.
Yes.
Number 10 was Horton Hears a Who. Number 19, scratching the top 20 highest grossing films of 2008, Tropic Thunder.
Yeah.
Number 20, one of my favorite Pixar films, Bolt, about the action-adventure dog that has his own TV show that thinks the world is actually a TV show. If nobody has seen Bolt, you are missing out. Number 21 was Brendan Fraser and Jet Li in Mummy, Curse of the Dragon Emperor. Awful movie. Yes, not a fan. Number 30 was Pineapple Express. Number 35 was Cloverfield. I love Cloverfield. I think that is a great found footage monster movie. If you have not seen that one, V, you got to check that one out. Number 44 was Role Models with Paul Rudd and Seann William Scott. Number 47, Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Number 49, scratching the top 50, Burn After Reading. Fantastic news. Number 90 was No Country for Old Men. Number 95 is a sweet, sweet film with Michael Cera and Kat Dennings entitled Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist. Number 98, I saw this movie opening weekend because I'm a big fan of Kevin Smith. Zack and Miri Make a Porno with Seth Rogen and Elizabeth Banks, who we just mentioned not too long ago, which I think is a phenomenally hilarious movie about making a independent pornography film to get out of financial dire straits. Hilarious movie. And just because I really like this movie and it scratched the top 125, the Ben Stiller produced awful acting by Jenna Malone and everybody else in the movie, but the movie is still badass, The Ruins, based off of the novel The Ruins. So that is 2008. That is Burn After Reading, written and directed by Joel and Ethan Coen, starring a plethora of actors that everybody has seen. Again, on HBO Max. I love this movie. I think V is going to have to watch it again in another couple of weeks, and then that is when V will likely appreciate it more.
Yeah.
V, I'm excited to get into your pick because, like I said earlier, I had only seen it one other time before, and by golly, did I love it again, and I can't wait to discuss it. Let's jump in. What do you say?
Sounds great, and I'm also so happy to hear that you enjoyed this film, especially because it's a little bit different than the normal Coen Brothers fare.
Definitely is.
I picked the 2018 The Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
Nice.
Yeah, I agree. I really enjoy this film. It is a Western, but it actually is a collection of 6 short stories. We haven't really done a film like this before, and I think that's because this is a pretty unique way to make a film and tell some stories.
I completely agree.
So as I mentioned, it is made up of 6 short stories, and what I'm going to do is actually discuss each of them and the actors who are in them, because there are different actors in every single one of these installments.
Oh, yeah. So awesome.
Very cool. So the film opens up with a story titled The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, and Tim Blake Nelson, who is just fantastic and has also been in some other Coen Brothers movies, as we like to see in other Coen Brothers films. They do really enjoy working with the same actors repeatedly, and it's nice to see them in different roles in different Coen Brothers movies. I do really enjoy that.
I very much enjoy that as well.
Awesome. And so Tim Blake Nelson is actually, speaking of George Clooney, he is Delmar in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? He's one of George Clooney's friends.
Yes.
Yeah.
So good.
He's also in another George Clooney movie named Syriana.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember Syriana.
He's most recently in Watchmen, the series that we've mentioned on this podcast before.
Oh, is that right? I did not know that. I haven't watched Watchmen.
And also he's in the Tom Cruise movie Minority Report.
Yes, he is. Oh, yes, he is. I love
so
his character
good.
in Minority Report.
He definitely...
He's always so good.
Yeah.
Like, that's the crazy thing about Tim Blake Nelson. He is literally always good.
Mm-hmm. And Clancy Brown is also in in this story. He has 327 credits to his name. He's a huge voice actor. God. Yeah.
Wow.
He probably most famously is that head guard in The Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But also, near and dear to John and I's heart, he is in Starship Troopers.
Yes, he is.
He's the drill sergeant.
You are relieved from command. So awesome.
He's so good. Love Clancy Brown and whatever he does. So The Ballad of Buster Scruggs is a story about Tim Blake Nelson's character, who's a bit of a gunslinger. He opens the movie by singing on his horse, which is a great song. There's really wonderful music in this movie. This whole movie.
There absolutely is, yes.
And so he's just this really fun, kind of cocky gunslinger who's breaking the fourth wall throughout the entire story, just telling us all about the Old West and what you got to do and how he really doesn't like violence, but, you know, when it comes about, he's going to take charge and take care of everyone. And by golly, does he ever. He kills a bunch of people, but he's like really sweet while he does it.
You can't help but actually love the guy as he's mauling down people with his 6-shooter.
Exactly. And so this just is a short story about him and his life and traveling around the Old West, and he's singing throughout as well, which adds to kind of his sweetness. And so yeah, right out the gate, this is just a wonderful first story for this movie.
I love it. I remember when I watched this the first time. I watched it on Netflix because that's the production company that actually released it. Mm-hmm. And as we're maybe 8 minutes in after he leaves the first saloon, I was like, I want to see this in theaters so bad. Because it's so beautifully shot.
It is.
That first few minutes is just gorgeous.
And I want a whole movie with Tim Blake Nelson as Buster Scruggs.
Please, please, Coen Brothers. Give us a full Buster Scruggs feature. I would love that, most definitely.
Maybe it could be their first musical.
That would be so awesome.
Right?
That would be so fucking cool. Hell yeah.
We then transition to the second story of this movie called Near Algodones. And this says James Franco.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of the Pineapple Express.
Right.
He also stars in 127 Hours, which is a fantastic movie based on a true story.
Directed by Danny Boyle.
Directed by Danny Boyle, that's right. One of your faves.
Yes. Saw that one in theaters. I still cringe at that tendon shot.
The nerve.
So brutal.
Mm-hmm.
That movie's nuts.
And he also plays Harry Osborn in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies.
Yes, indeed he does.
This story also stars Stephen Root, which is so great.
Yes, there he is.
As John mentioned, he is in most Coen Brothers movies. He is definitely, I think, most famous for playing Milton in Office Space.
Oh, absolutely. I have had the pleasure of meeting Stephen Root. I met him on the Paramount lot one afternoon. I was outside of stage getting background ready for a group of 40 background ready in wardrobe, and he walked right up to me and was like, "Do you know where," I can't remember what show he was on at the time, but he's like, "Do you know where this stage is?" And I was like, "Oh, Matt, before I say where the stage is, can I just tell you that I'm a big fan of yours?" And he shook my hand. He's like, "Thank you very much." Like, just exactly how you would anticipate him saying it, with his small glasses and everything. I was like, "Stephen fucking Root, hell yeah, I just met this guy." I love him. He's so great in every movie that he's in.
I wonder how many people ask him where the red stapler is on a daily basis.
I know.
Poor guy.
I can only imagine.
Yeah. He is also in Dodgeball, which is
oh hell yeah,
such a great movie, and he plays Gordon, and he's so funny in that too.
Obscure Sports Quarterly. We can play Dodgeball. Dodgeball is a masterful comedy.
It is. And he most recently is in the show Barry.
That's the show that he was shooting. There it is. I was like, it was something recent. Yeah, it was Barry. Yeah, they had moved to the Paramount lot from Sony for that season.
Oh, nice.
And this was like 3 or 4 years ago, so it must have been season 2.
Yeah, it must have been season 2 if they just moved.
I think so. Because I when I was doing Ray Donovan at Columbia in Culver City, that's when I actually ran into Henry Winkler and Bill Hader and was like, this has to be Barry.
Yeah,
because
for
it had been talked about. And I was like, oh, shit.
Nice.
Yeah, their base camp was right next to Ray Donovan, so I saw Henry Winkler almost daily. It was so cool.
I have been told by multiple people that he is one of the sweetest actors you will ever meet.
Oh, yeah.
Or just sweetest people.
I met him one time. Yeah, I met him one time, and it was just me basically being like, "I love you in Arrested Development, man," and he was like, "Thank you very much." That was pretty much it, and that's enough. That's all I needed. That's all. Yeah.
And so this story is about James Franco's character trying to rob a bank in the middle of nowhere, Old West.
So funny.
And Stephen Root plays the banker. Unfortunately, James Franco is not a good bank robber. And
no, not at all.
It's certainly hindered by Stephen Root's novel way of fighting off robbers as the bank manager.
So fucking hilarious.
This is also where the very recognizable meme with James Franco in it going, "First time?"
Oh, yes, first time.
That's where it comes from. This story in the Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
That's right, yeah, because a lot of people, when that was posted up, like, what movie is this? Yeah. And we were like, Ballad of Buster Scruggs. And like, what the hell is that?
Exactly.
A Western anthology movie, a great one.
Mm-hmm. The anthology, thank you. I've been looking for that word for like 2 days.
Oh, yeah.
You're right. That's what this movie is. And so the third story is actually my least favorite story out of this anthology. And
yeah,
now that I've watched this movie several times, the one that I actually skip, it's just really
you skip it.
Dark and really depressing.
Yeah, it is.
And it actually stars Liam Neeson. And for anyone who wants a reminder of all the great things he's been in, Taken.
Oh, yes.
Schindler's List.
Yeah.
Rob Roy.
Never saw.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The original Les Miserables.
Yes. He was Jean Valjean.
He's Jean Valjean, and then he's Qui-Gon Jinn in Star Wars Episode 1, the movie that John and I both agree is terrible.
Yes.
He's also in Gangs of New York, playing Leonardo DiCaprio's father.
Yeah, I liked him in that one.
And, speaking of Batman, he's in Batman Begins.
Yes, he is.
Ra's al Ghul.
Oh, yeah.
One of the best Batman villains ever. Everybody talks about Joker, but Ra's is a really cool character.
Yeah, Ra's al Ghul is badass character.
He is. And so Meal Ticket centers around him and Harry Melling's character, who most people our age would recognize from the Harry Potter series. He plays Harry's cousin, Dudley.
Oh my God. Are you kidding me?
No,
That's him?
That's him. He's just lost a lot of weight.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That is crazy. So funny because I was watching it this time around and I was like, I have seen this guy.
Mm-hmm.
Amy watched it with me, that Buster Scruggs, and I wonder if she didn't say anything because, of course, you know, the one moment when you're like, oh my God, wait a minute. And then Amy was like, is he gonna? And I'm like,
Exactly.
And that Meal Ticket was the one that definitely stuck with me the most because it was so fucking gut punchy.
It's
just
very
punches
haunting.
you.
It's a haunting story. Yeah. And so Harry Melling also more recently was in another Netflix produced movie, the Charlize Theron starring Old Guard.
Oh, cool. I saw that. I liked it.
Yeah, he plays that totally douchey weenie CEO of that company.
Huh.
Yeah.
I don't remember much of it, but I know there's a sequel coming, so I'll likely have to watch Old Guard again.
Exactly. And so Meal Ticket is about Liam Neeson's character traveling around the Old West in a wagon where he puts on shows for people in different towns and then, asks for money afterwards. And Harry Melling is actually the star of the show. He's an orator. He actually doesn't have arms or legs. And it's the story about them traveling around the Old West together and their relationship.
I do like that one. It's beautifully shot. The acting is great, but it's definitely a hard one.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. The fourth story is All Gold Canyon, which I think is the most beautifully shot of all of these stories.
Oh, stunningly shot.
That valley.
I wonder if you noticed. Yeah, I wonder if you noticed though, in every shot, in every edit in Buster Scruggs is like a different color scheme. Like even like around the camera lens, there's just a whole. I noticed it this time around, especially in the gold one because of how green and lush it was. But before that, even in Meal Ticket, there's like moments that are just gorgeous to look at. I mean, not even the landscape, just a shot of Liam Neeson drinking coffee is like, my gosh, like just paintings, really.
Absolutely beautiful, and I like how each story is very tonally different. The cinematographer did a fantastic job keeping all of these stories separate with different feels to them.
Yes, that's what I was going for. The tone of every story was completely different, and that's another reason why this movie works so well, because you literally you're brought into it based off of the way it looks, and it's so brilliantly done.
Yeah. Tom Waits is the star of this story. He is, I think, more well known as being a famous musician, right?
He is definitely a musician. Amy is a big fan of Tom Waits. She has a couple of his records. And when I first watched this movie, I watched this by myself. I think Amy was at work. We were living in Hollywood. And she came home as it was ending. She says, "What's this?" I'm like, "Oh, it's the Ballad of Buster Scruggs. I'm not going to show you now, but there is a vignette with Tom Waits that you are going to love." And she finally watched it with me this time around. And of course, she just was like, "That was so good."
It was.
I love it. It's so good. Mr. Pocket. I just love that whole thing.
It's such a great story, and what it is following this old miner who's looking for gold. And one of the things that I love about this story is how the Coen Brothers set up the pristine wilderness and how that piece is broken by the entrance of man.
Yeah, right. I really like that too.
And something I really love about this movie is the structure of it is set up by the camera focusing on a book. And so each new story we have is a new chapter of this book. And so similar to like an old Disney movie or like a Once Upon a Time when, in Sleeping Beauty, it focuses on the book, or even Shrek, actually. They use that too. And
Sword in the Stone also.
Sword in the Stone. Thank you. I was thinking of another Disney movie. So it's really nicely broken up, but it feels cohesive and it's introducing you to these stories so wonderfully. And the first page of All Gold Canyon, there's a quote on the first page that I absolutely love. It says, "And in that mighty sweep of earth, he saw no sign of man, nor the handiwork of man."
Yeah, I like that too. The drawing was neat on the page too.
Yeah.
I really like that.
Yes, there are illustrated pages for each story as well. And so, again, it just really brings you in and connects everything together so beautifully. I really love this story because not only do you connect with Tom Waits' character, but you see the disturbing of nature in conjunction with this man who is methodical, who works really hard. And so you start to sympathize with him a lot as he searches for gold in this canyon.
Definitely. Yeah, I like how he goes fishing. I like how every time he digs, he's 2 pieces, 5 pieces, 7 pieces, not enough to keep, and keeps throwing things back in the water. And the progression of his entire search is so awesome.
Yeah,
and it's Tom Waits, so you just literally are just sitting there with a fat smile on your face.
Yeah, the whole thing is really well done, and so you really empathize with him, even though there's this really wonderful message about nature being undisturbed until man comes in there.
Right. And Tom Waits has been in a couple of pretty awesome movies. I really liked him in the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, which is a Terry Gilliam-directed film where he plays the devil. I thought he was really good in that.
I really liked him in the Francis Ford Coppola Dracula, where he plays Renfield.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
The one with Keanu Reeves and Gary Oldman?
Yep.
Really? I turned that one off. I tried to watch it 2 years ago, and I thought it was so campy and ridiculous. I couldn't finish it.
I bet it doesn't hold up. I watched it in the 90s when it was cool.
Yeah. My friend Angie actually let me borrow her copy. She goes, "Oh, I love it. It's so good. It's so good. You'll love it." And I literally texted her after turning it. I was like, that was terrible. I didn't even finish it. And I trust Angie. I will always trust Angie because she's a big horror fan, and it's Dracula. So I was just wanted to give it a shot, and I could not get through it. No, Winona Ryder didn't even show up yet.
Oh, wow. You turned it off early.
I turned it off early.
And for any of our regular listeners who know we discuss this a lot, it has one of the worst horrible accent by Keanu Reeves in it.
Oh, okay. I might have to YouTube that then.
Yes, definitely. So getting into the last 2 stories of the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, the 5th one is The Gal Who Got Rattled.
Ooh.
It's not as hard to watch as Meal Ticket, but it's definitely a rough story.
Yeah.
It follows a woman played by Zoe Kazan, who some people might recognize from The Big Sick.
Oh, I never saw The Big Sick.
Okay, yeah, that's where I recognize her from. So the story follows her character, and she is with her brother, and they're trying to travel west, going with a wagon train. A lot of the takeaways that I had from this story, first and foremost, just the treatment of women in the 1800s.
Oh, yeah,
she's
definitely.
So disrespected by everyone, including her brother, and she's just such a sweet girl, and I just feel so bad for her.
I completely, yeah. I'm watching it this time around too. Again, it's been a few years, so I remembered each story, and I remembered what kind of the gist of them was. But the dialogue in this one, I really, really liked, especially when it's between her and Billy. Yeah,
and so what happens is. So her character Alice is with her brother, who unfortunately dies in the middle of this journey with this wagon train. And so the story follows her trying to make her way as a single woman. And the nice thing is that one of the men who has been hired to lead this wagon train, named Billy, really takes a liking to her and seems like a nice guy and is able to protect her a bit. And it follows the story of her trying to get to her destination despite the death of her brother and losing her chaperone during this time.
Right, yeah.
Again, though, beautifully shot, and it's all completely different terrain in every story.
Oh, yeah. No, and this one is one of the... I guess it's interesting, too, because as vast as all the stories are in their locations, this one feels a little more claustrophobic.
Yeah, I would really hate trying to sit on a wagon for 10 or 12 hours a day for months on end. That just seems excruciating.
No way.
No thanks.
Yeah, it does. And they're all eating beans and bread.
Oh,
it's
God.
No wonder everybody was so damn skinny.
Yeah, exactly.
Walking everywhere or riding a horse and
just scraping by.
Yeah.
In the last installment of the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, the 6th story is called The Mortal Remains and just wraps up this movie so beautifully.
Oh, yeah, it does.
This is, I believe, and the message I have taken from this story is a telling of basically the ferrymen on the River Styx.
What's the ferryman on the River Styx?
The ferryman is the one who ferries souls across the River Styx after their death.
Ah, gotcha. Yeah, watching it this time around, it definitely took on a different meaning for me, and that makes a whole lot of sense. I will agree with that one.
And this story actually takes place inside of a coach. There are 5 people in it, and some of them are quite recognizable. First of all, Brendan Gleeson.
Yes, indeed.
Who we recently spoke about because he's in Banshees of Inisherin.
Yes, he is.
He was also, speaking of Harry Potter, Mad-Eye Moody in the Harry Potter series.
Yeah, definitely.
And was in 2 movies we've covered so far. He was in my pick, Edge of Tomorrow, and your pick, 28 Days Later.
Oh, hell yeah.
I love every Brendan Gleeson performance I've seen now that I think about it.
Oh, me too.
He's great.
He is so good. He's actually in a movie with horrendous accents, but he doesn't do a horrendous accent. A movie called Cold Mountain with Jude Law and Nicole Kidman, and he is so good in Cold Mountain. I love him in that movie.
I feel like you love that movie enough where it should be on the list at some point.
It will. It's definitely going to be on the list at some
good.
point. It definitely will. And again, I'm not going to lie. The accents of Nicole Kidman and Jude Law, the
and
accents
Renee
that they try to
Zellweger.
put on are Renee Zellweger's actually wasn't that bad. It was more Nicole Kidman and Jude Law because they're obviously not Americans, and they try to really go off of like John Wayne style cowboy shit. Like it's just not very convincing.
No,
Although
it's not.
they are great in the movie, their performances are good. The accents suck.
Yeah. Again, another beautiful movie, though. Beautifully shot.
Oh, yeah. Oh, gorgeous film. Anthony Minghella, rest in peace.
Yeah. Another person in this carriage is Saul Rubinek, who was in the first Western you ever picked in this podcast. Probably the only Western you'll ever pick for this podcast, too.
It's possible.
I'm always open to talking more about Westerns, so...
Well, beyond Unforgiven, I do have like 1 or 2 other Westerns that I like. They are Clint Eastwood ones.
Great.
And I've been debating on throwing Pale Rider in there because I loved Pale Rider.
Yes, put that on, please. One of the best Westerns of the 80s.
Yeah, so good.
He was in Unforgiven. That's the movie we're talking about. That was John's pick for episode 9, I think.
A long time ago.
Long time ago. 40 episodes, actually.
Yes, indeed.
And there is a woman in this carriage on this journey, and she is played by Tyne Daly, who is just fantastic. I've always been a fan of hers. She started off... so she became really famous by playing Mary Beth Lacey in Cagney and Lacey, which is a really famous show from the 80s following 2 female police detectives.
Oh, fascinating. I think I've heard of that show. I don't think I've ever seen it, though.
Yeah, and then she, in the 90s and early 2000s, she was in another long-running series called Judging Amy.
Ah, yes.
And
Never saw it, but I know of it.
Yeah, I used to watch it all the time when I was growing up, actually, with my parents. And then lastly, she has a very bit guest starring role, but is very impactful, and I really liked her in the role. She plays Dr. Derek Shepard's mother in Grey's Anatomy.
Oh, I've never watched a Grey's Anatomy episode.
Well, it's still on. It's like the 20-something season, I think.
Yeah, and I actually just heard that
God.
the last final original cast member is no longer returning, so it's going to be all new people.
God, let that show die already. And in this carriage with these characters, they have a very heated debate as they're traveling towards their destination. And these people all come from various walks of life. There's a trapper. He's a mountain man. He looks very unwashed. He definitely doesn't have great social skills because he spends months on his own. There's this prim and proper, very uptight woman who is extremely pious, played by Tyne Daly. Then Sal Rubinek plays this Frenchman who seems like a bit of a gambler, and that's how he makes his money. Brendan Gleeson is one of 2, well, what they call themselves is bounty hunters.
Yes.
During this journey, this debate is around the types of people that there are, and each person has a different perspective given their background. The trapper has one opinion, the French gambler has another, and of course the pious woman says, there are only two types of people, upright and sinners.
Yeah, that moment was good.
And this is the story that has the most moral questions in it, and the story that really digs deep into life and death and the meaning behind it all, and how you maybe are judged. And it was a very fascinating story.
I really liked it a lot. The dialogue is so good, and it's shot so well for being so tight. You know, like the wide shots of all three of them, and then the other wides of just Brendan Gleeson and the other fella. And yeah, it's really shot very well. I really liked the way it was put together.
It is, and it stays interesting even though it's in one very small space. It's really well done.
Definitely.
And so those stories make up the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, each of them very different, with, as I said, different actors, a different message, but each one just wonderful in its own right.
I completely agree. They all are great. Meal Ticket, definitely the hardest one to watch. And the thing is, none of them are forgettable. Like, they do stick with you, which is awesome. And I remember when I first watched this, and I spent years telling Amy, I just like, we got to watch this like little, like 10 minutes with Tom Waits. I know you're going to love it. And finally she was able to, so I was glad that worked out. But yeah, it's so beautifully shot from beginning to end. The music is great. And I always wanted to return to Buster Scruggs, but that's the cool thing about an anthology, is you don't always get to go back.
Yes, I agree. You want to see more from each of these interesting characters. Each story has a lot of meaning, and I thank you for saying that. Each story leaves a mark on you and stays with you. That's such a great descriptor.
Yes. Haunting stuff, most definitely. Even the gold, is like, could you imagine being that guy? Or, because it's so many like one of my favorite movies is White Fang, and that's Ethan Hawke, young Ethan Hawke, and it's him trying to, go find his gold to get his fortune, and it's just so filthy and grimy and gross, and you're just like, my God, people lived like this and like went off on their own, left their families behind to go find their fortune. Every story of anybody trying to find gold is always fascinating to me, and especially because these are Hollywood movies. Obviously, it's all makeup, but it doesn't feel like it. There's so much authenticity in every one of these that really make you feel like these are ripped from something that actually happened.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And as I said, that's the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, written and directed by the Coen Brothers. Actually, a couple of the stories were loosely based on some books. There's All Gold Canyon is written by Jack London.
Oh, cool. Jack London wrote White Fang.
Exactly. They pulled from that book. And also The Girl Who Got Rattled by Stuart Edward White. And so...
Oh, that's an actual book?
Oh, yeah. And so...
Oh, wow.
When this movie was nominated for Oscars, it was nominated in the adapted screenplay category because they had pulled from some books.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I remember seeing the Oscar nominations. I was very happy for that one.
Yeah, me too. This is actually the first film by the Coen Brothers to be shot digitally, which I thought you'd find interesting.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Wow. That is actually very interesting.
Yeah. And at 132 minutes, it's the longest film by the Coen Brothers.
Oh, wow, really? That's cool.
Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of really great nods to Westerns and Western classics in this movie. And the song Cool Water that he sings, which is probably my favorite song of his. It's the first song of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually written in 1936 and has been sung in various Westerns, including in Along the Navajo Trail and Roy Rogers sang it in that movie.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. And so Stephen Root plays the bank manager in the second story that I mentioned. He says his clients are from Valverde, which is really funny because that location, Valverde, is a fictional Hollywood location that's been used a lot, actually.
Oh, that's funny. I did not know that.
Yeah, it's often used as a stand-in for... instead of using a real life South American country name. And
yeah.
That location has been used in Die Hard.
Hey.
In Commando. And also in Predator.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm so happy to hear that you enjoyed this movie. It is a bit different in terms of how the story is told, but as we've said, each story is beautiful and meaningful in its own right, and you take something away from each of these 6 tales.
Definitely, yeah. It is worth multiple viewings.
Definitely, and you can view it right now on Netflix.
Which was how I watched it.
Me too.
There you go. I would love, though, to see this in theaters. Like, if there was a Fathom event, I would 100% see this one in theaters.
Me too, especially given the scenery.
Oh, yeah.
And so those are our Coen Brother picks. We hope we maybe introduced you or reminded you of 2 more underrated films by the 2 of them.
Oh, I hope so. I hope that anybody that's a Coen Brothers fan that had no idea of these 2 movies has a weekend of fun ahead of them.
Yeah, and John, would you watch Burn After Reading with your grandma?
I probably would. I don't know how much my grandmother would have enjoyed it, but I would have, yeah. I know my grandma always liked George Clooney and Brad Pitt, so that would have been the selling point for her, if anything.
Yeah, I mean, there's brief gore in that movie, and
yes, a little bit.
there's a very brief sex scene, but there's no nudity, and it's not gratuitous or graphic in any sense of the word.
All.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't think anybody under the age of like 20 would enjoy that movie.
I have no idea. I don't know.
It's just very
I'm not sure.
Dialogue driven.
It is, yeah, it's dialogue driven.
Very
and
middle-aged
and
feeling.
very, very, yeah, it's got that middle-aged aspect to it for sure. It is more of an adult-ish type film, I would say.
Definitely.
And V, would you watch Ballad of Buster Scruggs with your grandmother?
Oh yeah, she loved Westerns. She would eat that
Nice.
one up. And I definitely would watch it with my dad, who also likes Westerns. My sister Shannon loves this movie. It's really, really
awesome.
interesting. Yeah, and I would actually say even people who traditionally don't enjoy Westerns, John, perfect example, you would still enjoy this movie.
I love this movie. I remember when I finished it, I posted on my Facebook page, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs is wonderful. And I had just nothing but wonderful discussions with people about how awesome this movie was and still is, because again, I have not watched it since it first came out, so that's at least 5 years, and it holds up. It's still funny, it's still intense, it's still beautiful. It's just a great time at the movies.
Nice. Yes, so even people who don't traditionally watch Westerns, definitely give The Ballad of Buster Scruggs a shot.
100%. Thank you guys again for joining us for this Coen Brothers episode. Great fun at the movies yet again for us here at Movies You Missed podcast. If you haven't seen either of them, check them out. If you've never seen a Coen Brothers movie, I would say the 3 that you could start with would be Fargo or Brother Where Art Thou and The Big Lebowski to get you going for just how different the Coen Brothers movies are. Again, they are very, very talented brothers, and I respect them very, very much. I'm very glad that we did a Coen Brothers episode.
Yeah, me too. And for anyone who has other Coen Brother movies that are their favorite, go ahead and send us a message. Let us know which one's your favorite.
Absolutely. Let's have a discussion, y'all. And speaking of social media, please do rate, review, subscribe, hang out with us on Instagram, hang out with us on Twitter. We are very much enjoying the interaction that we're having with our listeners across the globe.
And you can find us at Movies You Miss Pod on all the social media platforms.
Yes, you can.
Well, I think that about wraps up our episode this week. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. And as we like to close things out here at Movies You Miss Podcast, film is a form of art, and in art, all opinions are valid, except if you think
you have to shoot 14 to 16-hour days on set to make a good movie.
John and I will bitterly rally against longer days than 10 hours.
Yes, absolutely. The Coen Brothers can do it, Clint Eastwood can do it, and Clint Eastwood is 92. So y'all take some lessons, huh?
Yes, if Oscar-winning directors can do it, so can you.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Well, thanks, everybody.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye-bye.